President Xi Jinping delivers keynote speech at the opening of the Second Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation. Cyclone Kenneth makes landfall in Mozambique. And as fighting rages in Libya, the nightmare for migrants caught up in the conflict continues. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. For those of you joining us across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Coming up in business, South Africa's economy is feeling the pinch of inconsistent power supply. In sports, Cassis strikes 5,000 meters gold at the South Africa National Athletics Championship. We begin in Beijing, where the Second Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation has kicked off. President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech at the opening. He reiterated the Belt and Road Initiative is an opportunity for common development and announced more ways that China will continue to open its market. CGTN's Tui Huihao has the details.
Shaping a brighter shared future. President Xi said over the past 5 years, the Belt and Road Initiative has made concrete progress on major projects, pushed the plans from blueprints into realities, and provided new opportunities and territories for both Chinese and world development.
From
Eurasian continent to Africa, the Americas, and Oceania, Belt and Road cooperation has opened up for global economic growth, produced new platforms for international trade and investment, and offered new ways for improving global economic governance. It helps improve people's livelihood of countries involved and has become an opportunity for common prosperity.
She said in the future, pushing for high-quality development of the initiative is essential, and he stressed the importance of green development and innovation in BRI projects.
China will continue to carry out Belt and Road Science, Technology, and Innovation Action Plan, and will work with our partners to pursue for major initiatives, namely the Science and Technology, People-to-People Exchange Initiative, the Joint Laboratory and the Science Park Initiative, and Technology Transfer Initiative.
President Xi also announced a number of new measures that will further open up China's market. These included allowing foreign capital into more sectors, better protecting intellectual property rights, and increasing imports of goods and services.
We will further lower tariffs and remove various non-tariff barriers. We will steadily open up the Chinese market and acquire high-quality products from all over the world.
As one of the most important diplomatic events hosted by China this year, the Second Belt and Road Forum aims to bring about high-quality cooperation under the Belt and Road framework. These discussions are important as going forward, it is up to all participants to build a community of shared future and bring tangible benefits to local people. Tui Huihao, CGTN, Beijing.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has stressed 5 steps in his speech on how to further open up the country. He said China will strictly implement the new foreign investment law to make it easier for capital to enter the Chinese market. He called for strengthened protections for intellectual property rights and technology transfers. Xi also vowed to eliminate non-tariff barriers to increase imports of foreign goods and services, noting that China has the world's fastest growing middle class of consumers. On finance and monetary issues, Xi said China will not manipulate the RMB exchange rates to get ahead of the competition. He said China wants to take part in reforming the World Trade Organization. The leader also said China will put into practice business agreements signed with other countries. Well, Chinese President Xi Jinping says these measures to further open up China will be good for world peace, stability, and development. He's also calling for the fair treatment of Chinese enterprises, students, and scholars overseas.
We also hope countries in the world can create a favorable investment environment and equally treat Chinese enterprises, Chinese students and scholars overseas, and supply a fair and friendly environment for them to normally conduct international communication and cooperation activities.
All right, for more on the Belt and Road Forum, we are joined by CGTN's Gerun Chala in Beijing. Gerun Chala, great to see you again. Well, President Xi has delivered his keynote address at the opening of the Second Belt and Road Forum. Can you tell us more about it and what African states should focus on, Gerun?
Richard, President Xi Jinping's speech can be called historic because over the last almost 6 years, the Belt and Road Initiative has been delivering for most of the countries in it, especially those in Africa, through infrastructure developments, including energy supply. But this time around, whatever President Xi Jinping was talking about, according to experts as well, is about painting the right picture that anyone can expect as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, what to expect the world would look like under the initiative itself. And he was putting things into perspective with giving us examples in all sectors. For example, for African states, something that we Africans can focus about is on the reduction of poverty. He said African states, or those developing states across the world, will be helped assist, also should work with China in order to alleviate poverty in those countries. He also talked about zero tolerance on corruption. Remember, many developing states are suffering this scourge, corruption, across their borders. So China's assistance in this regard will be instrumental. The third and most important part that I believe Africa should focus on is on the green development issue that President Xi Jinping talked about. From now on, developments will be environmentally friendly, and we no more are going to affect Earth that we call home, he said. And the final and most important issue that I think should focus on here is that this Belt and Road Initiative is about changing the whole world as much as possible, make it a friendly place to live, where equality and protectionism, equality is going to be strengthened and protectionism should be dissolved. So whatever he said should be taken as a roadmap for implementing this Belt and Road Initiative, Richard.
Very interesting indeed. Gerun, let's talk about this a bit more. Perhaps you can unpack and zero in on certain African countries. We all know that China is the front runner on the BRI. How can other states, especially those in Africa, contribute to the successive implementation of the initiative? Gerun?
It takes two to tango, as the saying goes, and this cannot be an initiative that China only can play a role. As President Xi also earlier said, we should remember that this is an initiative from China, but this is an initiative that every member, remember 150 plus countries and organizations are now part of the Belt and Road Initiative, including those in Europe, the G7 countries like Italy and Portugal, those in Africa at the same time. So a collaborative effort exerted can only make the Belt and Road Initiative a reality on the ground. So African states, to be more specific, should also contribute in making every single aspect of the Belt and Road Initiative a reality by working together with the initiative, infrastructure developments and fighting corruption, and also making a friendly atmosphere available for any Chinese investor coming or them investing in this regard. So this is about a collaborative effort being exerted, as I was saying earlier, and this cannot be one waiting for the other to deliver, because President Xi, we should remember, said that if we work together, we can make the world a better place to live.
All right, Gerun Chala, thank you for breaking it down for us. Excellent reporting there, Gerun Chala in Beijing. Let's move on. Let's discuss this further. We are now joined in studio by Edward Kusewa, who is an economist and lecturer at the St. Paul's University. Sir, Edward Kusewa, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. First things first, what was your impression President Xi's speech at the opening ceremony of the Second Belt and Road Forum.
Thank you very much. My impression is that it's China's commitment to the rest of the world in terms of technical and economic cooperation, and also enforcing the principles of equality, and also enforcing the principles of mutual benefit for common development, sustainable development, and helping African economies sustain their economic growth.
Now, one of the issues he talked about was infrastructure, saying massive infrastructure and trade plan should result in high quality growth for everyone.
True.
Now, how can Africa benefit from this?
I mean, as far as infrastructure is concerned, we speak about connectivity and intra-African trade, and also Africa trading with the rest of the world. So I think infrastructure plays a very crucial role in helping African economies grow, and especially helping African economies to be able to trade with one another more effectively.
Well, you spoke of some key issues that President Xi talked about. He also spoke of the 5 major goals of BRI, boosting connectivity, which you mentioned, in policy, infrastructure, finance, trade, and people-to-people exchanges. Which one of these, in your opinion, are you seeing steady progress in the continent, and which should be shored up from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the most important part for Africa is to help African economies come up with very clear-cut strategies on policy. Once we get the policy framework and the policy infrastructure straight, then everything falls in place. Infrastructure and other things, people-to-people exchanges fall in place. So I think what African governments and African economies need to really implement is come up with a framework of clear-cut strategies that surround policy.
Okay. Now, how is China helping African countries realize their economic development and agenda?
I think right now what we are seeing with the second BRI is that China is opening up its market, lowering out the trade barriers that exist for African economies to be able to export their fresh produce, agricultural produce to China. And I think China right now, seeing that it is relaxing some of the policies that it had in the past and enabling African economies export products that have in the past not been given an opportunity, especially products around agriculture, products around farm produce, and so on and so forth. So freeing trade barriers, helping African economies export to their country, and helping African economies generally in trade-related investments.
All right, Edward Kusewa, let's leave it there for now. Thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Hope to speak to you again really, really soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edward. Moving on, the second summit for the Belt and Road Initiative has been taking place in Beijing this week. The Chinese initiative is not only about economic cooperation, but also a means to bring people from the different nations together. Working towards the goal is King Ma, a Chinese businessman living in Egypt. Ma is also a 2018 Big Ben Awards winner for the Global Outstanding Young Persons Prize. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more from this interview. Let's take a look.
Saleh Ma has been living in Egypt since 2000. He is married and has 2 children. Ma owns several businesses, such as granite and shoe factories. But now he devotes his full time to his media application company in Cairo.
Why did you choose Egypt first, and how did you start your business here in Egypt?
I first came as a university student, but I worked as a translator during my studies. I then started to import goods from China and sell them here. I saw a lot of potential in Egypt, so I told my parents that I would stay in Egypt once I finished my university. From importing products, I saved money and bought a machine from China and opened a small granite workshop and shoe factory. And from there, my business grew.
What are the challenges you faced when your business here in Egypt, and how did you try to overcome these challenges?
My first challenge living here was language. I learnt Arabic but didn't understand the Egyptian dialect, and after some time I had to learn the Egyptian way so that people could understand me. The second challenge in business was in 2013 when I had a new foam factory, but I faced dollar shortage issues after the devaluation of the Egyptian pound. In 2016, I sold the factory and I established this startup in 2017 for applications.
How did your family settle here in Egypt, and how can they be able to work with Egyptians or have good relations with Egyptians?
متزوجة صينية.
I am married to a Chinese woman and we have 2 little girls. One of them, Kausar, was born in Egypt, but now she's back in China for high school. One of the problems when settling down was the language and communication at the beginning. Another problem was that I had to leave my wife at home for long periods because of my work outside Cairo, but my Egyptian neighbors and friends took her in and helped her settle down and get used to the Egyptian living. We never felt alone.
The Chinese expats, how are they living here in Egypt, and how can you communicate with the Egyptians?
في سنين كتير.
There are many Chinese in Egypt, and more are arriving through tourism. When the Chinese come to Egypt and meet with Egyptians, they discover how similar we are, and we get on very well. Maybe because of the long history and deep-rooted culture of both civilizations. It's easy to make friends here. Me and most Chinese expats have a lot of friends in Egypt, even people I haven't met for a long time. They call me every once in a while to ask about me. There is a strong bond between us and Egyptians.
Even as the Belt and Road Initiative Forum is taking place thousands of miles away, the impact is felt globally. In South Africa, the Chinese Embassy, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, and the Human Science Research Council held a seminar on the initiative's impact. Now, the seminar provided an opportunity for South African government researchers, media, and public to better understand the Belt and Road Initiative and the progress being made in connecting BRI with the development agenda of South Africa and Africa as a whole. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
South Africa's Standard Chartered Bank says the Belt and Road Initiative is presently the most ambitious and far-reaching project of its kind in the world. It's a message that has been echoed in this seminar. The seminar provided an opportunity to understand how the initiative will benefit all countries along the routes, contributing to global economic and social development.
The golden rules for the Belt and Road Initiative is 3 together. That is, planning together, build together, and share together. The fundamental goal is to achieve win-win cooperation for common development through building 5 connectivities in policy, infrastructure, trade, finance, and people-to-people exchanges.
The Belt and Road Initiative is a China-led strategy to strengthen global trade links across the world, in particular between Asia, Africa, and Europe, with investment in an array of large-scale infrastructure projects along these 2 land and sea corridors.
The Belt and Road Initiative reminds me very much of what started out as a slow goods train, heavily laden, but today it is one of China's speeding trains that's moving at a remarkable pace. And either you get onto this train and become part of the ride and become part of the benefit, or you will be left behind.
China's general emphasis on infrastructure development has received positive endorsement of African leaders.
Many economists say the Belt and Road